I'm so excited you guys are here because I'm opening my doors to my one-on-one coaching program, Find Your Yes, because we all deserve to live a life that feels like a hell yes. Women are leaders, and leadership is found in entrepreneurship, leading teams within a business, volunteer organizations, your community, and at home with your family. Whether you're desiring to make a transformation into leadership or you want to up-level your skills to become a more effective leader, this program is for you. I've been leading at work and at home for over a decade, and this is what I know. It wasn't until I did the inner work that I personally needed to do that my leadership skills really improved. And that's why I created the Find Your Yes program. So you don't have to do the inner work alone. As someone who has been there, I will guide you as we work through your shadows, heal past traumas, overcome self-limiting beliefs, and watch you transform from the inside out. So if you're ready to create a life that feels like a hell yes, head over to www.jessiblois.com/contact to book a call, or head over to my Instagram @JessieBlois and send me a DM. I'm so excited to connect and to find your yes. Okay, guys, I know I say I'm always excited when I have a guest on because I am, but today is a really powerful story. Maurissa Szilagi is here, and I am going to have you just introduce yourself right away, Maurissa, because we have so much to talk about. Hi, thank you for
Hi.
being here.
So great to see you again. It's been a while since I've seen your face, but loving all of our conversations offline. So
Yes,
great.
absolutely. Marissa, why don't we just get right into it? And why don't you tell everybody who you are? And let's just start with your story.
So my name is Maurissa Szilagi. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have a master's of education, and I am a mom of two boys, a 5-year-old and a 10-month-old, and a wife and family friend, lover of all people. I am a little bit about my background. I grew up with probably all of the abuse stories you can hear as a child from my parents and the people they spent time with, and that led me down a really bumpy road of mental health as a teenager. I attempted suicide quite a bit of times and was in mental hospitals. And finally, a hospital was like, "We're sending you home tomorrow." And I was like, "Great, I'll be back the next day." I can't be where I'm at. I'm not safe. I'm not emotionally safe. I'm not taken care of. People aren't hearing me. People aren't protecting me. So you can send me home, but I'll come back tomorrow. Like, I'm going to do exactly what I did to get here. I'm not better. I need to
How
be
old were
better.
you at this time?
I was 12 or 11. And a lot of this got really, my mental health really got sort of fast tracked when I was like 10. I was on a softball team, and a little girl on our softball team went missing. And as a softball team, we kind of all rallied together to like go on a search for her. What ended up happening to this little girl, her name was Nicole Parker. I will never forget her name. I'll never forget her mom's name or the apartment complex this all happened at. I actually ended up moving into it as a later adult, which was crazy as itself. But it, this young girl was practicing for our softball game in her courtyard, and some bad guy took her into his apartment, molested her. She choked on her vomit and passed away. And he sort of put her in a suitcase with all these tools. And anyway, we were all, as a softball team, in the building, like knocking on doors with police officers or parents asking, have you seen our friend, with posters. And I remember hearing about what happened to this girl, but didn't really know what molestation was or rape, didn't know any of that. And as a kid, I was in a program called Alateen, which is like Al-Anon for children. And I asked the staff, the sponsors of that meeting, what is that? And as they're talking about it, I'm looking at my biological sister, who I no longer have a relationship with at the time. I'm looking at her, I'm going, that sounds oddly familiar. Like, that doesn't sound like what we know it as. And lo and behold, what I started to piece together was my biological father had been raping us our entire lives, but calling it this love thing that you do with daddies. And it's, I never felt close with my biological mom. I say from birth, we were not destined to be together. As a mom now and an attachment therapist, I know all the things that went awry in that dynamic. And so I really gravitated to my biological father, even though he was a drunk and a druggie and never around. When he was around, I took those times as what I thought they were. So that fast-tracked mental health, because here I am thinking I have a parent who loves me, doesn't love me, is abusing me. The sponsors look at my face when I'm hearing this and they go, oh, great. What just happened? They've known me all my life. And they pulled my biological mom aside and they said, here's what she's disclosing. And she goes, her friend just died from this. I think she's really just trying to understand it. And she dismissed it. And so my mental health really progressed from there because she didn't believe me. She never confronted my biological father. And she kept sending us to visitation with him because she needed a break. And they were divorced and separated and all that. So like that fast-tracked mental health for me, fast-tracked this desire to not be in a home of somebody who did not want to, A, believe me, and B, kept forcing me to go to a home where I didn't feel safe. And then this kept happening anyway. He was like, too bad, this is what we do. And later I kind of pieced together that it wasn't just him, it was friends of his that would take me on. It was a lot at that time. And so at this hospital, I said, I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm either going to die from this or I need help. Like you can't help me here and then send me back home to a place that's not going to make me feel as my core sentiments as a therapist seem valued and heard. I'm not going to see that at home.
So, okay. So you're the oldest of you and your sister.
Correct.
And I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this because I knew there was abuse in your childhood. I didn't know to what extent. I should have put a trigger warning at the beginning of this podcast. We'll write it in the show note. I'm just digesting everything. So how did you even get to these meetings in the first place? Did your mom put you in these meetings?
Yeah, my bio mom was going to the Al-Anon. It's where she met a ton of boyfriends, to be honest. She was like this like revolving door of where do I meet.
Was it because she was in there because of your biological father?
And herself. They were both addicts as adults. I think she was sober-ish after she got pregnant with me, but I think the conception of me was definitely not sober.
Okay. And then you're in these meetings, you're going in and out of the hospital. People know this is happening at this point. And where was Child Protective Services?
I don't know what happened. So I don't know what happened to that because every hospital I went to, I would share this story. And I don't know if mandated reporters, I'm a mandated reporter now.
So am I. That's why I'm like,
I don't know what was happening with that. For all intents and purposes, we were still visiting this man after I was reporting it over and over again. It wasn't until, my last mental hospital stay was Northridge. Was it Northridge Psych? I think it was Northridge Psych. And after that one, they sort of propelled me down a program that is now called something else, but back then it was called AB 3632, which is where school districts will pay for somebody to go to like a foster care residential program if they're not being helped in the community, because that's what school districts pay for when you're paying for your kid's school in the neighborhood or whatever. So eventually through that, somebody finally heard me and was like, we're going to send her home and she's going to come back. And I was basically a bane on like the Medi-Cal program because I was racking up. So, I was staying at hospitals for 30 days at a time.
You were safe at a hospital.
Isn't that crazy that I was safer with a bunch of crazy?
Yeah, no, it's horrible and it's tragic and it's everything that's wrong.
To stay there. I was preferring to stay there over home, which tells you I wasn't getting the needs I needed met. And I wasn't really getting them met at a hospital, so to speak, but at least nobody was touching me inappropriately and people were listening to me and hearing my story. And
it's not even that your needs weren't being met at home, right? It's so much beyond that. You were being so abused in every aspect of the word at home.
Correct.
Was your sister also going back and forth between the hospital?
No, she didn't. My biological sister didn't go to hospitals until she was much older. Actually, until I was away. So once I was away at a residential, it was called the Help Group Project 6. I went through numerous homes there because at that point, I'm 12 years old. They ask you, do you want to be adopted? I say no, because I'm not really interested in the family. I just want to get better. I want to heal from the stuff that happened to me. I want to get better, but I can't get better where I'm at because I can go to therapy, go back to my bio mom, and she's going to ruin it. That's
okay. I have to ask you a question. You are 12 years old and you want to heal. I mean,
I think I have
amazing for a 12-year-old that you even knew healing was a part of the process.
Because I have like amazing. And I have like an amazing extended family. You know, I have uncles and aunts and grandparents, but nobody really knew what was going on. It wasn't like my bio mom was disclosing everything that was happening. And nobody knew what to do. Like it was foreign territory to my family. I had my grandma who would visit me at mental hospital. She would bring me a Baskin Robbins chocolate shake. And then my uncle and my aunt would come. And they're always people that I've gravitated to as even as a child. All my family photos that I have are with this uncle and aunt and their son. And they would come visit me, but nobody knew like the extent of what was happening. It wasn't like Terry's telling my bio mom's name was Terry. It wasn't like she was telling everybody in the family what's happened. She was just saying Marissa's going through something. And most likely, from what I've heard from the family, she was blaming it on me. It was my problem. It was, you know, to extent it was me being a problem child. And which was fine because once I went into this residential program, foster care program, I finally got seen, valued, and heard, which again, those are the core tenements of any therapy I do. If my clients don't feel that in my session, I've done them a disservice, and that makes me really uneasy
That
about
will
what I'm
be
doing.
the title of this podcast, Seen,
It should be because
Valued, and Heard. Yeah.
those are my core tenements that people, if you're around me, if you don't feel that, I'm not being genuine to who I want to be.
It really makes my eyes sting. Like I get emotional because in any relationship, I don't care who the relationship's between, we all crave, every human craves being seen, valued, and heard. And the idea that a child
knew she wasn't being, yes.
Yeah.
And most traumas, you know, from all the things I've heard in all of my career and all of my life and everywhere I've been, trauma can be put into one of those categories where you're not seen during the trauma, where you're not valued during the trauma, where you're not heard during the trauma. Like if I broke it down for a narrative, it would be one of those things, right? And so I think those are even more particularly important when you're in relationships of value to you, of significance. If you don't have those things, of course, they're not going to feel great. But I got very lucky at where I went because there was a staff member. His name was Dr. Adam Grudberg. He's who I named my oldest son after. He met me. He met my bio mom, and he looked at her because the point of this program was I would heal and then go back to her.
Okay.
And I was like, this is just ridiculous. Like, can I just go to it?
Yeah. Can we be done? Yeah. Can we just be done?
Can we be done? Can I emancipate? Because I was asking that. Once I heard that word, I was like, can I do that? Like,
why didn't you want to be adopted? Explain that to me. Was it adopted by a family member?
Yes. So I wasn't provided with the option to be adopted. Like it was never like, let's get adopted by a family member. It was like, before I went into this program, it's like, do you want to be adopted by like a foster family, a new fresh family, or do you want to go into this like therapeutic treatment program that's attached to a school and feel better? And I was like, I have extended family. My hope is that like I get rid of this.
They're asking a 12-year-old to make this decision.
Yeah, I signed myself in, actually. It doesn't happen like this anymore. This is like the 90s.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is this still how it's happening?
No, it's the late 90s. And when you're doing it through the school district, which school districts still do to this day, you have to have the kids buy in because they need to know what's happening. Like they need to have ownership of accountability of their life. So I signed myself in, and so did she, with the premise that I would go back to her at some point because school district's paying for this, right? It's not cheap. It's, you know, I don't know. Back then, probably $30,000 a month. I don't know, something insane. But I met this wonderful man named Dr. Adam Grudberg, and he met my bio mom, and went, yeah, you're not getting her back. She's going to be here till she's 18. And my bio mom like lost it, made accusations that I was in a romantic relationship with this man and that he was taking advantage of me. Later, she finds out he's a homosexual, and I would not be his preferred choice of child. Mm-hmm. So again, she burned her own bridge with that. And when he came in and said, I think you've screwed this kid up beyond measure. She's not leaving here until she's ready, but she's not leaving with you. My life really felt like, okay,
you're going to breathe.
I can breathe and I can do the work. And it wasn't easy work, and I didn't do it perfectly. I did typical teenage stuff, you know, ran away to get a piercing here and a tattoo here, and, you know, did the usual teenage stuff. But eventually my bio mom moved way far away to Pennsylvania, and I was able to like create who I wanted to be without connected to her, which I think if I didn't have that option, I would definitely not be here. Like I'm all about the people I've met in my life that have come into my story are the change agents of who I became. And if I didn't go to this place, if I didn't meet Dr. Adam Grudberg, yeah, I don't know where Maurissa would be right now. I
So
could tell you.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So you lived there from 12 to 18.
Yeah, I aged out. So at 18, I aged out. I had to go figure out. I think I started renting a room from a friend who I met at Alateen, and her mom. Her mom was like a flight attendant, so I was there as like an 18-year-old adult to help watch her teenage kids while she would fly. And then from then my story is so funny in the fact that like I did all this therapy for 6 years and felt healed, and then a minute when I turned 18, started using drugs. And I find that comical still today, because it was like, why would you go do that?
I mean, really, I feel like you would still have the amount of trauma.
The trauma was heavy. Yes. And it's still, it's definitely still present. I have my triggers. I have my special times of year that I'm not my happiest, but I do a good job of communicating that to my world. I'll say, this is not my week. There's certain weeks of the year I won't see clients even, and let them know ahead of time. I respect your trauma triggers. This is like, I can't be a good therapist to you this week. But I think, it's again, part of this story of like, I kept trying to evolve and kept trying to figure out, am I doing all the right things? And yeah, I'll be sober actually 20 years in September, which is hilarious to say. It's like an almost 40-year-old, right? So like I did all these fun things when I was younger, got it out of the way. Yeah. But I met so many people, the connections that I made doing these experiences. And I think that's why it happened. When I started using drugs at 18, my uncle, who's my biological mom's brother, he looked at me and he was like, he called me Riss, and he was like, Riss, what? I showed up at a cousin's bat mitzvah in rave gear high. So it was very obvious I was not doing well. And he said, what are we doing? This is so bad. And I was like, just having fun. I'm going to go to a party later. And he's like, I'm going to pick you up tomorrow at 6 a.m. And I said, I won't even be home by 6 a.m. And he said, fine, 7. And he picked me up and had a long conversation. And back then I had like a very small cell phone. And he said, I'm going to break this. Do you know anybody's number by heart? And I was like, no. And that was how I got sober. It was like, I'm going to break this phone. You're no longer allowed to make these attempts. And that connection, is what brought us really close, because later on in my story, in my life, him and my aunt and my cousin let me live with them. They recently adopted me this June. I got adopted.
I know. I want to get to all that because the story it's so beautiful. Okay. I have a question. When you were in this residential home and the doctor said you're not going back with your mom, had your dad just like walked away from all of it? Where was he?
So at Northridge Psych, there was like some family session, and I looked at him and I said, I'm done with you. I want nothing to do with you. You make me.
And I'm sorry, I should have called him your bio dad. Dad. So
it doesn't matter. I told him off, and he didn't agree or deny anything I was saying. He just sat. He was high at the time, so he just sat there and just like whatever. It's kind of funny because the same conversation happened, and I skipped this part of the story. But before I went to residential, my bio mom decided it'd be a good idea to take us on the Montel Williams show. And it was an episode called Out of Control Teens. And I've been trying to find this video. I can't tell you for decades because I don't have a copy of it. But she thought it'd be a good idea to broadcast my suffering to the world. And she didn't frame it as that. She framed it as like, hey, this talk show wants to help us as a family. It's a free trip to New York. They're going to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like 11. I have no idea. This is when AOL was up, guys. And I was like chatting in my Hanson group going super excited to go to New York because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I would say that the only thing that came out of that experience was 2 things. One, it was a free trip to New York, but 2, they lied to me and flew my bio dad out for the broadcast. And he came on drunk as a skunk. And when they told me he was coming on, I was backstage and I sort of threw a hissy fit through a chair, threw a couple things. And I don't know why they didn't do anything either. It like is mind boggling that you see a kid melting down and they send me on the show with him and he does his little adage where he says like, "Hey, big girl," which is what he called me. And I just remember looking at him like, this is disgusting. Like, what are we doing here? I can't, I'm telling the audience like this is not a good person. Why are we reuniting family here? This is not working. Anyway, it was Montel's first series of Out of Control Kids. I've since watched a bunch of them. It's horrible that they did that show series because I think that's terrible. But it was the same conversation I had with him on Montel that I had with him at Northridge Site. It was, why are you who you are? Why would you have kids if you weren't going to do better? Like, what?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Why bring kids in the world if you're going to look at me and you see them suffering? Like, that's pointless. And he sort of distanced himself throughout residential. He was never involved in anything. I made that very clear. That I wanted nothing to do with him in therapeutic process. I wanted nothing to do with my bio because both of them were going to ruin my growth because I would say something and they're going to take it away. That's not how I'm going to heal at all. So I, he was gone until I was about 18 and I aged out. And then I realized like I need money. And so I would go back to him and sort of manipulate him for money and feel gross at the same time. I felt like I was getting paid for what he used to do to me in the past by going to get money, but it's how I got by sometimes. And then eventually when I was 22, I was at a bar with friends and I don't think he recognized me, but he like checked me out a little bit and winked. And I was with guy friends at the time who knew my story. And instead of them kicking his butt, we all just exited the bar. And that was when I've never seen him since. I haven't talked to him since I was 22. I know that when he dies, I'll find out because I have cousins on that side of the family, but I have no contact with that man. And I haven't had contact with my bio mom in, I don't know. I've seen her at a couple funerals, like, family funerals, but nothing connected since probably 25.
That must be really hard and triggering too, to know you're going to a funeral and you might see her there.
Yeah, my last funeral was my grandma's right before in the middle of COVID, which we found comical because she would have hated COVID. So she died right before COVID hit. And preparing for that, I was a nursing mom. So like I was hoping to like, if I ever had to see her again, I was hoping to be a little bit inebriated. But I was nursing at the time, my oldest. And so I powered through it. Luckily with the whole family was on my side. It was like Team Maurissa and
Yeah.
she had her moment in time to say what she had to say about grandma. But that I will never have to see either one of them again from my knowledge, which is very solidifying. I'm sure from what I hear from extended family, she still posts about me. She'll post something, she'll hear something through the grapevine and go, "Oh, look, my oldest daughter did this," and tried to claim the things.
She's not local, like you don't have to ever worry about running into her.
No, I think she's in Maryland somewhere.
Okay.
So
So
which is great. And he's local-ish. He's in like North Hollywood from what I recollect.
Oh,
But
really?
I don't think I'll ever see him either.
Okay. Can you just briefly talk about what they do in residential to help children?
So I think it's a mixed bag. I think from what I saw, I mean, I think from an early age, I was destined to be a therapist or a helper person because I was sort of sitting in the residential. There were 6 girls to a home or 6 boys to a home. They never mixed and matched unless you were in the 18 and over homes. What I was watching as a kid, I would remember looking at these people going, wow, they have worse stories than I do. Like most of the kids who were where I was had been in foster home and residential. And they had been shopped. This was my first like go at it. But it's basically a very structured program. It's a housing unit. So there's 6 girls, 2 staff, and overnight staff. People fluctuate, but it's a set of rules and level systems. You get your meals, you get your medication. There's group therapy, individual therapy. And then most of the time they're connected to like a therapeutic school, which I think was my saving grace because it's really hard to focus on education when you're traumatized, right? How are you going to do both? So education's kind of dumbed down, so to speak. It's easier to pass. It's less workload, right? You need to gather the information the best you can. But there's a lot of therapy there. There's individual, there's group, all the staff are therapeutically trained. And I think at one point in my residential time, I tried to go back to public school. Just was it was
That's
too
what I was
political. Yeah,
wondering. Okay.
too political. I tried it. Like education wise, I was ready. Behavior wise, I was ready. But like being with the students and trying to understand the politics of things was
Yeah.
really a lot. And at least at the school I was at and the residential I was at, I was like top tier high functioning. When I
Yeah.
was going into public school, I was not top tier high functioning, right? I was like,
It's hard enough to
I stood
just
out.
be a teenager, period,
Correct.
with a
Correct.
loving, supportive home life. So that's
Correct.
why I was like, were you in residential and then you're just going to like the local
No, they had like
high
a they had
school?
like a connected they had like a school that all the kids we'd get bused to from our
Okay.
homes on one giant bus, which is a chaotic bus ride every day, with all these personalities of kids. But I would say like that's most residential structures. Even today, it's therapeutically based. At least now the therapies are well diverse. Back then it was just talk therapy. Now it's like equine therapy and all these things in a residential setting can help some kids talk differently. Not every kid wants to talk.
Locally, for us that are local here, is this Casa Pacifica?
Yes, so that would be
Okay.
like a Casa Pacifica,
Okay.
and Casa Pacifica has it's pretty much similar to what I lived at,
Okay.
except mine was in the valley. But yeah, very similar structure, multiple homes, different kinds of kids in each home, staff rotating, their school is nearby or they're given to one school.
Right.
And for that purpose, it's, making sure the same eyes are on them all the time so we can make sure goals are going well, that they're doing what they need to do. Or if they're not, what else could we be trying would be
Right.
helpful, right?
How to
So
support these children.
yeah, and I think, I got very lucky just where I went because I found staff that I connected with, most of them for life. I mean, unfortunately, Dr. Adam passed away early in my college career, but I have this long speech I gave because graduating class of 10 kids, so you got to do whatever you wanted. And I had this long speech where it said, "Watch out, Adam, I'm coming to take your job." And then when he passed away, I went, crap. I got to do more than just his job as like, he was just like the assistant principal. He played his guitar and talked to kids all day from what he liked to say. And I was like, I can't just do that because then I'm only going to help like I want to help more kids like he helped me. And so it was interesting when he died because I was about to give up on college. I'd taken algebra for the fourth time, had failed it for the fourth time. And I was like, this is not for me. He ended up passing away right when I was about to give up. And then I went, great, now I can't give up. I have to keep going.
So that's where I was going next. So your uncle has a talk with you. Now you get put on a better path.
Yep.
It is so easy with everything you had been through in your life you basically could have said, fuck it. I have so much trauma and that trauma
I did it a
is
couple
so
times for
heavy.
a short period of time. Yeah, for a short period of time, I did give up on a lot of things. There'd be moments of my life where I was going, and then it would be like, I need to just screw up for a little bit. And those screw ups would be like very minor, rack up credit card debt at Target for no reason, like things that like were repairable, so to speak. But yeah, it's really comical to me that I spent 11 years in community college because it took me 10 times to pass algebra. And that's because the therapeutic school really didn't give me the what I needed to pass it. Yeah. And that's fine because they gave me so much more in the therapy aspect. Like without the therapy aspect, I wouldn't have passed it 10 times either. But after I got through community college, it was like, boom, bachelor's, boom, first master's, boom, second master's. I got through all those easy. It was just getting through.
Well, listen, I hate math, so
I don't know too many people who like math either. It was
both
not
my kids do. My kids like math. I'm like, ask your dad. I don't know how to help you.
I don't know either. I won't be that. I'll be getting a tutor for my kids.
That's not my thing. I definitely chose a career where I don't need math. And
same. I say that all the time as a therapist. I have to add money plus money equals money. I could do that. That's fine. I don't have to add anything else.
Yeah, that's not for me. Okay, so how did you know, or did you always know that you were going to go into such a helping profession? And did you know who you wanted to be working with?
No, so I know when I was with Dr. Adam as a kid, I became sort of like a free staff on campus after a few years. I was helping kids problem solve. I was call the junior staff. I had keys to the building. I had a walkie-talkie campus. I would give tours to donors. It jived me to be able to calm down people, and I did a great job of it. Minus the few times I AWOL to do some teenage stuff. But I felt really important there. Dr. Adam really just looked at me and said, I see you, from a young age, babies loved me. From a young age, I loved kids. I loved being somebody people could talk to and give good advice. And so I looked at Dr. Adam many times. I was like, what am I going to do? And he let me know very early on, like, kids like you, they don't make it. Like, where you're coming from residential, it's going to be really hard to get the degree you need to do what you're looking to do. So I think him preparing me for that made it much more like sort of feasible for me to know, like, it's going to be bumpy, so I can give up, but I'm going to have to go back because it's going to get bumpy. And we talked a lot about me becoming a doctor, and I was like, ooh, would love that. But as schooling went on, by 10 years of community college, I was bride of school already. And I'm
trying to do the math, Maurissa, and 10 years of community college plus the bachelor's and 2 masters, you're not old enough.
I'm 40.
No, I know, but so am I. I don't think I could have fit that all in. I started a family and had a career.
I did all of that. The 10 years of community college started, I think I did do a couple community college classes while I was at residential, because high school didn't work for me, but college did, because it's not like clicky. You can go to class, do the work. And so I started getting credits for that in high school. But I just did back to back. I never took any breaks. And so it was 10 years of community college. And then it was the 2 years of bachelor, 9-month program for the first master's, 3 for the second master's.
Wow. And then did you start your family during this time?
So we got married 2 days after I graduated, my last master's program. And then I started that we had our first son 2 years later. So
what are your masters in?
So the first master's is an education master's. It's in human development and psychology. It's from Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And then the second one is from USC, and it's a social work master's.
So you really said, if I'm going to do this, I'm really going to do this.
Well, so here's the bumpy part of the story again, is I'm at Channel Islands working on my bachelor's, and I have a professor who's a real horrible professor. He says something inappropriate to me. I report him, and in reporting him, I meet this professor who was at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. Mind you, Channel Islands had only had a couple classes at that couple years of students when I went. It was very early on in their college career. They hadn't even been approved yet to like give legal degrees. You were just like kind of winging it, hoping they would get the approval.
Okay.
And he looked at me and he said, so I've been wanting to send a kid to Harvard. I think that's going to be you, because they're going to love your story. And I said, did you see my GRE score? I'm not going anywhere. Like, the GRE score was basically crap. And I tried really hard on that, but it was crap. And he said, no, I think we're going to get you in. And I was like, you are out of your mind. So here I am going, why would I apply for this? Like, I'm never going to get in. But here's how the story grows again. I keep making connections. I think my healing power was connecting with people. If I didn't connect with people, I wouldn't have healed, because then I'm speaking with the department secretary of where I want to go, calling her all the time. Her name was Mary Kiesling. And Mary and I became good friends. I was telling her, I don't know how I'm going to do this. She was on the phone when I sent in my application. She was like, do it. And I'm like, I'm not. I'm going to throw up. Like, this is not happening. Sure enough, I got into Harvard's Graduate School of Education, which was the hardest program I've ever done. Like, that was 9 months of eat, sleep, breathe, study. I saw nothing really in Boston but the Cheers restaurant, and went to the law school a lot to study, which was pretty cool. But I didn't get to do anything but
it's incredible.
Study. And I met my best friend, one of my best friends, who married us there. Him and I joked that we spent $100,000 to meet a best friend, because neither one of us got to tour the Boston because we were too busy studying. But again, it's connections keep me going. If I'm not connecting with people, if I'm not networking, if I'm not sharing my story, if I'm not looking and eagerly pursuing ways to grow, I'm going to flatline. I have to keep growing. And
it's part of your healing process that you're going to be doing forever.
Yes. And people think, it's why would you keep doing it? Like, why would you keep doing new things? Why don't you just stay still? Because if I stay stagnant, I'm not meeting the next person. I'm not meeting the next right, like what's the next right thing? I don't know, because I need to meet the next right person. So I mean, I got very excited to go there. I was the first person in Channel Islands to go to Ivy League, which was really cool. And then from there, I was thinking I was going to go there and then go into a PhD program. But everybody at Harvard was like, Maurissa, you're 30 at the time. You really want to spend another 10 years in school? And I was like, no, I don't. I'm so tired. I don't. And they're like, why don't you get an MSW? I hadn't heard MSW yet. California is so PhD, PsyD biased. Nobody was telling me that there was an easier way to help people on a clinical level without this, like, the letter sounded nice, right?
Sure.
Maybe one day I'll get like an honorary PhD. That would be my like hashtag life goals. If some college gave me an honorary PhD for doing good things in the world. But like, I don't need to earn those letters to help people. So I shifted gears when I came back from Harvard going, I don't want to do an MSW then, because I don't want to spend 10 more years and $300,000, to finish this journey. And applied to USC and CSUN, got both acceptance, of course, because Harvard's on the thing. And who's going to say no that at that point? And I went the USC route and finished that up. And then,
did you always know where you wanted to end up in your career, or did the journey kind of show
so my
you?
goal at a young age was to take over the department of DCFS. That was my goal.
Okay.
My husband will joke with you that was the goal I said I wanted when we got married. Then I had critters, my little creatures, and went, I can't work 90-hour work weeks and love them. Like, I didn't realize how much being a mom was going to heal me until I became one. And I couldn't leave them at that point. And so my trajectory went from like wanting to take over the world and these big departments, because I felt like, and I still feel this way, in order for those departments to do better, it needs to be ran by somebody who's lived the life that the department's serving. And most of the time, the department's not being ran by somebody who gets any of the adversity that they're making policies for. I still have hopes that maybe I can work there or consult.
I was going to say, your kiddos are young. You still have a lot of time.
Yes. I still have lots of work years away to keep going. But in the meantime, my goal was always to take over the department. And then it shifted when I became a mom to going, I need something more manageable. So it became private practice, which is what I do predominantly now. I specialize in family dynamics and family trauma, separations, divorce, crisis, and adoption and foster care. And then teaching parents how to be better parents for their kids, because I know how it feels to be the kid. And that gives them a very good.
So incredible that you took this path, because I mean, there's so much beauty and healing in it. It also, to me, as just listening, could also, I imagine, be really triggering.
There's moments where it's not great. Yeah. Like I said, there's certain times of the year. My birthday every year is not my favorite. It has gotten even more not my favorite because when my grandma passed away, she was the day after me. And we always talked about like when we go, because we always celebrated every birthday together. Whoever goes first, not going to be any more enjoyable, right? And so that time of year, I'm a little grumpopotamus, and I always have to plan some kind of trip. I can't be home and just stagnant. I need to do something to keep. And lately, since I've had kids, it's been spoiling the crap out of my kids because that gives me joy. And then, my sobriety anniversary always brings up like this, like dynamic of being proud of where I come from, but knowing what I had to go through to be proud of where I came from is a little bit of a double-edged sword. So those are a couple weeks of the year that I'm a little jarred.
Do other people's stories ever?
No, ironically, I think there's this special gift that a lot of therapists have, and I will tell you, a lot of my colleagues will tell you that's why we became therapists, is because we've been through so much. If a client is talking about so much, it just makes that connection so much deeper. And then I can support them in ways they would never hear, because I know what it, like, I can feel it. The only downside is that most of us therapists like that also don't sleep very well because we process things in the middle of the night. So that might be the only jarring part of it, is that maybe somebody shared something that's a little bit connected to my story. or a little bit too heavy for me to hear. And then so I'll dream about it, process it, have to come back to it at a certain point after. But that's why I have my own therapy. And I could, circle back. And I have colleagues that, like-mindedly, if we get triggered by a client, we can reach out, but I think most of my clients, I would hope most of my clients would say they feel that even though it's virtual through the computer, they feel that I feel their pain, that
They feel seen by you.
Seen, valued, and heard. They feel like I'm in the room. Like they feel me in the room. They feel me after. I have many clients who will say, I heard you in my head when this thing, like I could hear your, because I'm using my trauma as a superpower. And I tell that to a lot of my teenagers. Your trauma doesn't have to be the end all. It could be a superpower if used in the right ways, right?
And that's such a good way to put it, because that's exactly what you've done. You've really used it as your superpower.
For the most part, yes. I think I've done it. I think I'm very grateful that I get to be, here. We see this a lot too with like the sobriety world, right? People who are addicts, they get sober. Where do they go work most of the time? In recovery.
Sure.
I see it as the same concept. I survived family trauma and attachment trauma. What better use to use that in but the world of family trauma? And unfortunately, thanks to COVID, there's a lot more of that than we've ever seen. And so those families need people who are going to get both aspects, right? I can understand how it felt to be a parent to me too, right? I can only imagine if my kid said, hey, the person you mated with is abusing me. How would I answer? Totally different than my bio mom, for sure. But like, that would be a little bit triggering for me too. Like, who did I pick and why? Like, what happened there? Like, so I think I'm able to put myself in every piece of the puzzle and get a feel for how it could be, because I work with a lot of parents right now. Most of my client caseload is parents who have really troubled kids. And I'm able to like get in the thick of them and let them know, like, I can only imagine. But on the flip side, I was your kid. And your kid can get here, but here's what we need to do now. Like, we all need to be doing, like, it's a we problem. It's not a them problem. And I think that's the problem with a lot of therapists who see kids is they buy on to what the parents say. I never do that. I actually look at parents and go, I want to know nothing about how you feel about this. I don't care about how you feel about this because it's not your kid did this. It's a we problem. The family system and structure is a we problem. I need to fix all three of you. I'm not going to spend an hour with your kid and send them home to you and then nothing gets better because it's not. It's an all of you problem. So if I'm seeing your kid, I'm seeing you twice a month as well because you all need. It's a puzzle, and I wish. Because there's so many times my bio mom took me to therapists and I remember her sitting there just bashing me and then believing her like it was God's word basically. And, there's this one block on Ventura Boulevard in Encino that I can't drive by because there's a therapist office there. And he basically taught her how to restrain me in the office when I would go out of control because she wasn't believing me on the sexual abuse. And he like gave her, him and her were like putting my arms behind my back and putting me putting my face in the floor to like take deep breaths and be calm when I would say this was happening and they would tell me you're lying. And I was like, oh my, how could I lie about this? Like how, as a therapist, I rarely see kids, if they're lying about something, beat it to a dead pulp like I was beating it. Like normally a kid will give up eventually. If they're lying about it, they stop talking about it. I'm almost 40 and I'm still talking about it.
Yeah.
Had to have been, been some truth there. And so I think that that's what I try to do as a therapist for families is make it so that this is not a blame game. It's the dynamics of the family. All three of you had a part to play. All three of you have goals. All three of you need to be working on these things because that's what's going to heal the family, not making the kid the problem. It's not always the kid's problem.
Not singling out the child. Did you find it hard to want to start a family, to find a partner that you trusted in that way and then you wanted to start a family with?
I mean, so my legal parents now, my parents now would tell you the crappiest of boyfriends you can imagine I brought through the door. And I was engaged twice before I met my husband. I was this person who went, I don't want to have as many partners. Like my mom dated way too much. Like I thought it was gross how many people or how many men I'd wake up to that were just like it wasn't how I wanted to be as an adult. I can still count my partners on my hands. That was my goal. I don't want any more than this. I went through a lot of guys that I thought would be the one. They never worked out for higher blessing reasons. I would say that the guy that I've ended up with, my husband, has to be the most patient person ever. He's a military veteran. There's some pros to that. One, he has no memory of what happens the next day. So if Maurissa has like a meltdown moment, literally the next day he will have forgotten most of anything that happened, which is great because then he doesn't hold anything against me in a court of law for the next time. But he is very patient, very supportive, very proud of who I am and what I do. And likewise, right? He's got his own bumps in the road, and we love each other for our faults. But I didn't have kids until my mid-30s, and that's why, because it took me a very long time to funnel through and to really find a partner that I thought would not hurt my kids.
Yeah. Oh, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine processing that.
Yeah. And if I had daughters, I might feel a little bit differently. But I always wanted a daughter, and I feel like there was some things happening above me that made it so I didn't have a daughter. But even so, like I talk about this a lot as a therapist, is, my son, my older one, he's a naked kid. That kid wants to be naked all day. That is incredibly triggering to me because even as a little kid, even though I knew what we were doing was like father-daughter time, I felt gross being naked during the day. Like if I was changing, I was doing the like locker room change where nobody could see anything. And that was from a young age. Like I don't have any pictures of me in underwear or naked.
Yeah.
And so when my little guy's running around naked, what I do is I say out loud, I'm so glad you feel safe being naked. I'm so glad you have a home where you get to be safe naked. That's all I say. And then that turns down my dial to go, I can't have you naked, right? Like that turns that down for me.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of work because when he started being naked was the age I remember things happening. And so I tell that to parents a lot, when we're going through reparenting, which is what I do with a lot of therapists, is like pinpointing the things that happen to you in your life and making sure when your kids are that age, we're not giving them that energy. Like I'm not punishing you for being a normal kid because I didn't get to be. If anything, I'm going to connect with you on how it feels to be a normal kid so I can feel like how it was to be a normal kid, right? And so, yes, it was incredibly challenging, and I would say that has been really healing as well. It's been. I really wish I could write my kids off more than I do as like a therapeutic cost, because I think if I didn't have them, I don't know if I'd be as calm as I am today. I wasn't always this like even keeled.
I have met some people that calmed down once they had children.
Correct. And I think that happened for me, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
I was hopeful, but I think, being able, as a kid, I don't remember I love yous and hugs and kisses. I don't remember any of that. And being able to always do that to my kids and have my kids, like my 5-year-old still wants to sit on my lap and snuggle and caress me. Never had that. So I think being able to do all that is incredibly healing.
That's so beautiful.
And continues to be incredibly healing and challenging at the same time, right? As they get older, it's going to be, I wish my kids well to try to do anything sneaky, because between me and their dad, we've lived it all. And so good luck to my children to try to put one over my head. So at least I can use my superpower again, right? Because I've done most of everything.
I think you're going to keep using your superpower. I think you're just getting started. Can you tell us just about your new adoption? I mean, it's really recent.
Yeah, so it happened June 2nd. Great day. And it's kind of a great story in that. So my uncle and my aunt, or my parents now, they went to Africa and Europe last September when my second baby was born. And it was kind of a hidden joke, because when my first son was born, they also went on a very long trip. And I was like, you guys, like, that's attachment trauma. You can't leave me when I'm bringing creators in the world. Anyway, before they went to Africa, they said, like, they've always called me their daughter. I've always been part of the family. Since I was like 20, I lived with them on and off after I aged out and I was making horrible money decisions. I ended up living with them throughout my entire bachelor's program with the agreement that if you let me live here and I don't have to focus on paying rent and paying bills, I will get good grades. Got straight A's there, did a great job, got into Harvard. So they were like, got a return on their investment. And, you know, as we got older, you know, my brother is their son. He's also adopted, by the way. They didn't have any biological children.
Wow.
So he's adopted. And, you know, as we got older, they would talk about like, you know, when they passed away, all these things. And they just included me in all that. Like it was automatic that I was a part of that. And as I've gotten even older, it's like, you know, Maurissa, you're going to be in charge of like decisions for us and all these things and managing the things because I live in California. My brother lives in Bend, Oregon. And
Okay.
so he's far away. He's a nature guy. So I don't think he'll be coming to California anytime soon. And before they went to Africa, they went like, crap, we should really have made this legal because if something happens in Africa, like they're not going, I don't have any document that says like, I'm yours. It would just be like, believe me here. And we didn't get on it. Luckily they came back from Africa fine and nothing happened. And then afterwards it was sort of like this running thing of like, when are we going to do this? Because you're getting older. And I think it was twofold decision. It was like, hey, we need to make this a legal family, but B, you've always been a part of the family. Why aren't we doing this? And I think the reason why it wasn't done earlier is my grandmother who passed away, she would have had a hard time with that choice. She was a supporter of my bio mom up until the end, believed a lot of things because that's what a good mom would do, right? And so that's always been the stickler for me is she was raised, my bio mom was raised by a good mom, but wasn't a good mom. Is her mom stood up for her till her deathbed to the entire family. And had we gotten adopted, she probably would have had a stink face about it. She probably wouldn't have been happy about it. So it was kind of better that we waited till she passed away and did it. But I'm hopeful that this year's trauma weeks, which are coming up in the next few months, feel a little bit lighter because I'm not legally connected to the people who brought that on.
Yeah.
That's the hope from it anyway.
I hope that for you too.
It feels really special to be a part of that. You know, I've actually helped people get adopted. I used to write home studies back in the day. I've had many families adopt kids that I've watched them at the same courthouse. And so to sit there and be asked, do I want to be adopted at almost 40 felt very like circle of life, like, you know, completing this puzzle. Again, it's all about that connection piece, right? The connection got so deep that we made it official, which again is my way of getting through this is to continue to connect.
I am so touched that you came on and shared the story. It's tragic and beautiful, all wrapped into one. And
Correct.
the fact that you're doing so much good with it, everybody, I feel emotional. Everybody that crosses your path and these families that get to work with you are just so fortunate.
Thank you. I'm equally as fortunate that they trust me with it.
Yeah.
It's
so incredible. And I can't wait for you to write a book.
We've been talking about that. My dad and I, before I went on maternity leave, I was like, I really want to write a book. And he's like, oh my God, book sales, blah, blah, blah. We have to do all these things. And I was like, that's still in my trajectory. We had talked about me doing a podcast at some point. I was trying, again, here's this thing of like, I have to keep doing more. I'm going on maternity leave and I'm going, what else can I do? What else can I do? But
you know what, because with the book and a podcast, Maurissa, you never know who's going to listen. And someone might read it and someone might listen and you'll never know. But you might have a profound impact on their life. The reason the reason I'm doing the podcast with women, majority women, and sharing women's stories for the most part is because when I was at my darkest time, I would listen to similar minded podcasts and I would hear other people's stories. And just in those moments where I was alone and I was listening to these stories, I just felt seen. I always tell people when they come on as guests, like, my hope is you share your story, somebody listens and they feel seen and understood in maybe a moment where they feel lost. Mm-hmm. So you never know.
I really hope that happens in my future. It wasn't a no. It was like, you're about to have a baby. What are you trying to do? But instead of doing a book and then doing a podcast, I created a family training that I'm really proud of that helps families figure out points of contention and how we can draw down the chaos a little bit. So I did that before maternity leave, which was, I checked a box of like doing something to be able to give to the world. But I want to do more. And I feel like,
You will.
before in my day, there wasn't podcasts, but people like Eminem resonated with me as a kid because he was this kid like powering through. And then there was a series of books. I don't know if you know of them, called The Child Called It, The Boy Called It. Okay, so those books were my like, oh, I feel seen and heard. Mind you, I didn't have it, as his story is really gruesome as well. I didn't have all of those things, but it was a shared compassion of like, whoa, you got
and it
through
comes
all
back
this.
to that connection piece, right?
The connection piece, yes. And so I had told my dad at some point I wanted to write a series of books. That the one, because in my day, kids like me, there was 1% of us who were going to be going to college. That came from where I came from, 1%. Now the foster care ratio is about 5 to 10% of kids in foster care will go on to college. That's like 20 years later. That's still not a great number, right? And so my hope would be that like I could do a 3-series book instead of being The Child Called It, the 1% this, the 1% that, because back in my day it was 1%. It's still not a no. We need to.
You have a 10-month-old. You're busy. I mean, I didn't start doing any of this when my kids were like able to make their own meal.
Yeah, I have a few years probably. But those are all like, giant dreams and goals of mine that would, again, continue to facilitate this connection of like doing new things. Like in order to make those things, I would have to meet new people, right? And so that's what I want to keep doing, is meeting these new people, connecting with them, sharing my story, seeing how I can help them too. It's not like a only help me page, but like how can we grow together and do things together is my goal.
Well, I'm so happy we met and we've connected. Agreed. And thank you so much for sharing your story with all of us.
Thank you.
And in the show notes, there will be information about how anybody can reach out to you.
Perfect. I would love that. Bring them on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thanks so much, Maurissa.
Bye.
Bye.